let's take a little bit of a turn here because Congress is happening, the pandemic's happening, President Trump's response. But it's all coming as the Attorney General, Bill Barr, is flexing his own power. And this week, the Department of Justice dropped the criminal case against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, a retired Army Lieutenant General who pled guilty to lying to the FBI. The AG decided to re-examine the case as the DOJ reviewed the Russia probe. And as I wrote with my colleagues in Friday's Post, the decision was greeted as a triumph by the president and his allies who have argued for years that Flynn was set up, but with dire alarm by Trump's opponents who saw the move as an attack on the rule of law. Asked by CBS News about how historians would view this decision, Barr said this.
Well, history's written by the winners, so it largely depends on who's writing the history.
Peter, this isn't over, though. The judge still has to sign off on the motion.
That's exactly right. Judge Sullivan has been skeptical of Michael Flynn's defense in the past. As recently as December, rejected a lot of the arguments his defense team had made. He's already ruled on this issue of materiality. What the Justice Department did in dropping the case was they didn't say that Michael Flynn didn't lie. What they said was he shouldn't have been asked the question in the first place because there was no viable investigation going on at that time that would have required that interview, and that the answer that he gave, untrue as it might have been, was not material or especially relevant to such an investigation. Well, the judge has already ruled on materiality in the past, and it's possible he would look at this with askance and say maybe he's not so interested in dropping the charges. However, it would be pretty unusual for a judge to insist that the Justice Department go forward with a prosecution that it itself doesn't want to go forward with, even though in this case the defendant has already pleaded guilty not once but twice. So it's likely to be approved by the judge. We'll see what he does. But it's important to remember what this is and what it isn't. It's not a statement by the Justice Department that Michael Flynn didn't lie. What it's a statement about is that the previous Justice Department and FBI shouldn't have prosecuted him, that they have exceeded their authority, they abused their authority, and that they seemed out to get him or entrap him rather than to genuinely be interested in finding out the truth.
Tolu, is the administration going to bring him back, going to bring back General Flynn, or maybe put him on the campaign trail? What are you hearing?
Well, I would be surprised if we see General Flynn back at the White House, but this is already a very unusual situation in which somebody who pleaded guilty is now sort of saying that he was wrong to plead guilty and that he's essentially being let off the hook. President Trump has said a lot of positive things about Michael Flynn. The White House has tried to use this to distract from the broader challenges that they're facing. The White House press secretary spent about 10 minutes talking about the case of General Flynn during a less than 20-minute press availability today in terms of the White House press briefing. So they want to spend a lot of time talking about this. They think this is a political win for them. They've seen Attorney General Bill Barr deliver a number of political wins for the president by intervening in cases, by essentially trying to redo the Mueller investigation and discredit it and discredit its origins. And this is the latest iteration of that, in which the president can say, the Mueller investigation was all part of this witch hunt, part of this deep state coup against my administration, even though there's a lot of evidence that shows that the Mueller investigation was a real investigation. It did lead to a number of guilty pleas by people who were in President Trump's orbit during the campaign, and there was a willingness by the campaign to accept information that was coming from the Russians that was negative about Hillary Clinton, to promote some of that information, such as what we saw through WikiLeaks. And even if collusion wasn't proven, the Mueller probe made it very clear that there were a lot of contacts between Trump acolytes and folks who were trying to push disinformation during the 2016 election. And this latest episode shows that the Attorney General is trying to sort of discredit all of that.
So, Molly, if the president's going to relitigate the Russia probe between now and the election, what's the speaker going to do? Is she going to engage? Are House Democrats going to be out there talking about their own Russia investigation?
I doubt it. I think, the campaign strategy for the House Democrats in 2020, and for Democrats mostly in general, is the same as what they feel won the election, the midterms in 2018, which is to ignore Trump, assume that the backlash to Trump, to whatever extent it exists, is basically baked in. Part of the reason that we've seen the president's approval ratings be so incredibly stubborn and stable is that so many people have already made up their mind about him, and nothing can change their opinion because they already didn't like him or they had already been completely bought in. So the feeling that the Democrats have had is talk about health care, talk about, the handling of the coronavirus crisis, talk about the issues, and try to make an impression that the Democrats are interested in governing rather than, because, the president said today everything they do is because they are haters. And that's the case that he's going to make, and that's, the Flynn development plays into this entire narrative that the Trump campaign and the sort of MAGA media world have created, this sort of alternate universe where, General Flynn has been a victim of this terrible witch hunt. And so to the extent that they can continue to make that reality seem real, they can shut out everything else. And so the Democrats have tried to focus on, trying to show that they're focused on issues instead of being drawn into that whole debate, which gets very messy very fast.
Sue, quickly, I've been seeing some grumbling from Republicans about FBI Director Chris Wray pressuring the president to maybe push him out because he's not doing enough to overhaul the FBI. What are you hearing about the director?
Well, there's certainly a lot of Republican frustration in the Senate about Christopher Wray, in part because they don't feel like he's been transparent or proactive enough at rooting out what many Republicans see has been a politicized Justice Department against the president, and also to the public concerns that were unearthed in reports, internal reports suggesting abuses in the surveillance courts, and that he hasn't done enough to make them feel like he is taking their concerns seriously. I think it's important to remember, though, Christopher Wray was confirmed with 92 votes in the Senate, including every Republican vote. And the thing that Republicans also don't want right now is a contentious confirmation hearing for a new FBI director. So I think a lot of that discontent, while they're comfortable talking about it publicly, realistically, I think a lot of them are settled in to have him stay in that job. Although, as always, it's entirely up to the president on what happens there.
Peter, 10 seconds. What are you hearing on Wray? The same?
Yeah, I think the president's disenchanted with Wray. He's not found him to be the loyal person that he wants in that position. And while I don't think he's necessarily going to fire him, there's clearly some bad blood there. And with this president, anything can happen.